You are listening to the Home Service Business Success Show. We have been accelerating the path of success for home service companies since 2011.
There's risk in everything you do and don't do.
When you're going to go build a large business or a small business, just focus on the basics.
That's it, man. Blocking and tackling. That's exactly right.
What cards do I want to keep on the table? What cards do I want to take off the table? This would freak some people out. You ready? And the answer is yes.
And no.
And no, because I've done both.
Hey, my friends, welcome back to Home Service Business Success Show. I'm Kenny Chapman along with Chris Crew, your hosts. And what are we? We're your confidants. We're your coaches. We're your friends. We're your peers. Chris, how are you, my brother?
Good. I would like to describe it like this. We're just your tribe.
That's
if you
it.
had a collection of people back in the day, right? It'd just be your tribe. We're your tribe, and we include those people in our tribe as well.
There you go, man. And in the home service space, obviously a lot of transition, a lot of change. And I'm going to say, if you're listening to this episode 5 years from when we recorded it, that statement is going to be true because that's how this industry, amazing industry, continues to evolve. And today we want to jump into our second mailbag episode of season 2. So this is where our amazing followers, listeners, and watchers of the show have written in and said, hey, we want to ask a couple questions. So Chris, I'll take kind of the lead on asking these, and we'll jump in and kind of knock through these a little bit. And we're going to kick with Oscar. Dropped a question around the HVAC industry overall, and how does it affect the economy is the question.
Well, I think that's a little bit of a loaded question, Kenny, because we all know based on what happened around 2020, we understand that our industry is pretty damn close to recession proof from what I would say, right? I mean, something major on top of that would have to happen. But how does it affect the industry as a whole? I think it's a big contributor. It supplies jobs. When you think about manufacturing jobs of equipment and parts, then there's distribution. I did a research study, Kenny. It said for every factory job that's supplied, specifically in the HVAC industry, it downstream creates 3 more jobs. So
about that, yeah.
There you go. Oscar, how does it affect the industry? It's really good for the industry, but I think there's a different question that's probably wanting to be asked.
Yeah, I think, Oscar, I would jump in as well and say, I think there's a question behind the question, which is one of my favorite things to dig into. And if I'm hearing you correctly, I think the question is, how is the HVAC industry going to affect my personal economy, right? And that's the key. There's the overall economy, there's the U.S., Canada, Mexico economy in North America, and then there's the global economy and all. What it comes down to is, how does it affect me? And here's what I'm going to tell you. It's going to affect you really, really good if you do your homework, if you do your education, if you do your implementation, if you stay strategically focused and you're willing to embrace technology while keeping the main thing, in Chris Crew's words, you're going to absolutely thrive. For how long, Chris? I'm going to say for the next 50 plus years, because as the white collar and blue collar shift takes place, where blue collar industries will continue to thrive, HVAC is going to lead that. And I just am super excited for you, Oscar, as this transition continues to play.
Kenny, let me throw something else in there. I'm reminded of a statement of a dear friend of ours, Alan O'Neill. Some of you that are our listeners and watchers probably know who that is.
Love Alan.
Love that guy to death. Just an absolute legend in our industry, and built an amazing company in Houston, Texas. But he said something to me one time, Kenny, and this has been a while back. We were talking about something. I forgot what it was, but he said, Chris, it's really simple. Anytime there's ever a problem in the business, I can 100% point it right back to something that they're not doing that people would consider to be the basics.
Yes,
he was
100%.
Like, everything gets really complex, technology, no matter how big the business gets, he said, focus on the basics. And so when you're going to go build a large business or a small business, just focus on the basics.
That's it, man. Blocking and tackling. That's exactly right. Which I think leads us well into the second question we want to get today is from Josh, who is asking around, how do you launch a new location from scratch or from acquisition? Massive, obviously, we could have a season on this, much less part of a mailbag episode, Josh. So let's condense and obviously, if you are currently a blue collar member, make sure you dive in with your coach around this. And if not, we do consultations and happy to walk you through this at a deeper level. However, just for jumping in, what would you say? What would be some top things to think about, Chris?
Well, I'm going to go back to the question, which is it easier to do it from scratch or acquisition? And the answer is yes.
And no.
And no, because I've done both.
Exactly. Me too.
Really clear when it comes to the M&A world. Be careful what you get into,
That's
because
it.
most of the time what you're buying is not what you're getting.
That's
And I don't mean this in a bad way. A lot of people think they're going to buy this business and they're going to keep everybody on and the owners will stay on. And look, let me just simply say something. When two different people's vision align and they agree on that, and they can go hand in hand down the journey together, it'll work amazing.
Yes.
But there's a reason why someone is seeking out to sell their business. As an owner, they're looking for an exit strategy sometimes.
Yep.
And if they're not, the business might actually be in really bad shape. And why would you want the owner, who's allowed this to happen under their watch, by the way, that all of a sudden some miracle is going to transform in their mind and they're going to be on board? The reality is I don't see it happen that often. And in many cases, I can say this, Josh, I've seen that be actual blocker. So you might look for some type of asset purchase, particularly. Kenny, it goes back to the old days where I would buy telephone numbers from businesses and not buy the business. I don't want the assets. So it really goes back to what's the strategy. And I'm just going to really quickly, Kenny, share with the strategy that me and my partner use to expand. It goes back to having mid-level management and leadership development inside the business. Because when you open up a new location, leadership has to be in the building. 100%. And I've said this 1,000 times. I've said it once. When leadership leaves the building, you're done.
Yep.
When there's no good leadership in the building, it doesn't matter. You've got to have someone leading the charge. Now, that doesn't mean, Josh, that you're going to need call taking, dispatching, operations, financials. So what we did was we sourced all of that as shared resources areas. Anything that could be done out of the hub, I ran a spoken hub concept. So all of the acquisitions that we did, we would just tuck in telephone numbers, so on and so forth. But the key is we would take somebody from our existing business and plug them in as a leadership role into the other business. So when we're, quote, going from scratch, we weren't really going from scratch because that's a hard road ahead. It's like starting a business all over again. But I will say this, every one of those that you do, you're going to learn something new that you didn't know before. Yes. And experience is the best teacher, Josh. I'm going to say number two, make sure that you don't underestimate the capital that it's going to take.
Yes.
So leadership, number two, capital. And then number three, understand that sometimes getting it right doesn't mean getting it perfect. And you're going to do it a little messy sometimes. And you're going to learn a few things along the way. Remember, it's just a lesson that you're going to take to the next one. If you want to have a conversation around M&A and buying and all that, I remember the old days, Kenny, there was somebody I could mention their name. I know you would know their name. He said, you can buy more customers in a day than you could ever market for.
Yeah. And I think that's true. And I think that also that ties to, do you want those customers in a day? Like, it kind of goes back, Josh, to the question behind the question again, not to beat that up, but what is your growth strategy? What is your level of risk? What is your capital, balance sheet look like from a standpoint of growth? What's your exit strategy? Why are you looking to grow? And I think those are some of the things, because I know in my own service business life as an operator, I just wanted to grow. I just was addicted to the dopamine. I loved the deal. So I bought companies, I that was what was fun to me, was getting to befriend a new owner and go through that whole process. And to your point, Chris, one of my kind of cliche statements is, if you buy a business and after 3 months, all of the team and all of the leadership is still on the payroll, it's either a miracle or it's a sure sign of bad leadership on your part, because you need
Mm,
to part ways with some of
yeah.
those people, right? And so I think, speed of is there a better way to and again, this is operational DNA. I personally enjoyed acquisition growth, but it created a lot of complexity and a lot of challenges. I made what 7, I think I made 7 acquisitions, and all of them ended up being tuck-ins, except one was a complete rebrand because I tucked in my current business. I had tucked it into somebody's 40-year brand and rebranded my original business into that. And so, there's a lot of things going on there, but what are you really looking to accomplish? That's where it's all at. And sometimes, you're looking to buy, you mentioned, Chris, you're looking to buy calls. Before 2020, there was also a time where we were looking to buy talent.
Yeah.
Like I'm going to go buy a company because they've got some good technicians that I might be able to stick around. So what are you looking to acquire? And I think at the end of the day, you hear Chris and I talk about, from Dan Sullivan, our mentor, unique ability. And I think that one of the reasons that most acquisitions where owners stay on, to your point, Chris, probably 98% of them go south. 2% of them could not go any better for either party. Why? Because they completely stay in unique ability. I know exactly who I am and why I'm on the planet. You know exactly who you are and why you're on the planet. And we both do those things. That's where we've seen. And guess what? If there wouldn't have been a few of those, and we could name drop, we won't, but I can think of a half a dozen, and I'll go as far as you mentioned one of them earlier in this episode. But if people that we know hadn't have done that so well on their own, and then early private equity did it well and kept them in unique ability, then that's what started this whole thing that really got out of control, because then it became all about capital and not about human capital as much. It
Mm.
became about leverage capital. And so, are there good ways and challenging ways? Yeah. And you're going to be on the ride. So, how fast do you want to go and why do you want to go there? Do you want to take a train, a plane, or an automobile? That's all you're talking about.
Well, Kenny, here's another perspective as well. Because and this is where I get really bent out of shape when people go, "This is the game plan. Go do this." Because
Yeah.
let me just say this: like that
Yeah.
game plan is not always going to work the exact same because there's too many variables
Yes.
depending on who's actually executing the plan. I'll give you an example of that. This would freak some people out. You ready? I know of a company who expanded their footprint into a market about 2 hours away from where they were. They started up with zero customers, zero brand presence, zero anything. They are a multi-trade company. When they opened all 3 trades at once. They put all the infrastructure in place. Think about the capital that takes, by the way, to get that
Yes.
going. And then watch this, Kenny. They went from zero revenue in 4 years' time to 25 million.
Mm.
Now, here's what I'm going to tell you this. For 4 years straight, it lost money.
Mm-hmm.
So
Mm-hmm.
that's why I asked the question.
Yep.
Now that business today is doing very well. And it goes to, you got to understand, what is your strategy? Am I trying to make a splash in the market, or am I trying to grow slow, right? To
Yeah.
stay stable. And that goes back to the DNA. Not everybody can go slow. They don't know how to go slow. And some people that want to go fast can be very chaotic when they're trying to go fast, right? So
Yes.
Josh, and every listener and consumer, every situation will be a little bit different. There could be an overwhelming, like, arching, hey, these core things need to be in place when you do it, but everything else could be left up for depending on the situation.
Yeah, and I think, as we think about strategy, let's flip-flop that now for a moment, and let's look at, I'm gonna, what are we doing? Sending a shirt to the people that
Yeah.
we
Yeah.
answer the question. So I'm not gonna call out this next questioner because it's a bit of an intimate question, and long relationship with both of us as blue collar member, and I just want to honor the privacy of the question. And yet, I'm going to share the question is around an exit strategy. Really don't know where to start, but what's kind of a roadmap for people who are or in this situation? You're starting to think about selling, but you don't know if it'll be to PE, maybe another local company, maybe you sell it to a team member. What are things you start to look at, let's say 3 years out, maybe 2 years out, to ensure the business, the things are in line when you go to sell? Great question. And so we talked about acquisition. Now let's look at the other side. Maybe when it is time to transition out, we've helped a lot of clients do this over the last several years and really over the course of our careers. But where would you kind of start with some of that thinking for this person we both love and adore?
I want to speak to the hearts of our audience right now when I say this. Make sure that you put the first things first. Selling the business is not first things first, because guess what? After you sell, no matter how you do it, no matter how you exit, there will be a life beyond that. And so I would say, make sure you understand what that looks like, because you certainly don't want to exit your way into a new journey that's not what you really wanted. And then you got to go back and start all over again. So get really clear on what you think life needs to
Right.
look like for you afterwards. And then, Kenny, I'm reminded of one of our clients, Tim. I won't call last name, but just for the privacy, when I had a conversation with him, and this was in 2019. And I'll never forget, I said to him, Tim, you've got to run this business like you always plan on selling it. Always. My advice to every listener is run this business like you plan on selling it. Always. Because, Kenny, you're always going to make different decisions. If everything is always about the let's just get it ready to sell, what you're doing is you're selling somebody a bill of goods, and it could hurt. It could hurt your earnouts. It could hurt back end money. It could hurt a lot of things. So if you're going to do it right. I'll say that.
Yes.
Do it the right way. Build it so that when you hand the keys over and you walk away, they've got exactly what you've put in place, right? The revenue streams, the profitability, the key people that are in place. So I think for me, Kenny, it starts with let's start building this business so it can run without me, because it'll be way more valuable without me. That's the first thing I would do.
Yes.
How do I get this thing where management's in place, processes are in place, and it runs itself? That way it's super predictable about what it's going to do. The next thing that I would start looking to do is do things that increase the value of the business now. And that can be different things depending on who the buyer is, right? And an example is buying a company that has no liabilities at all whatsoever. Like it's just a free cash flow business. You're going to get a higher multiple for that, right? So think about things like making sure that margins are really strong so that you can drive really predictable profit at the end of every month. Not heavying up on overhead, but Kenny, not trimming overhead to try to make it look like it's worth more than it really is. Because once again, depending on who you sell to, and let's just say it doesn't matter who the buyer will be. It really doesn't,
right.
because
No.
it's going to transact money. It's still money,
Yeah.
right? So if it's a private equity, if it's an individual, if it's an employee, if it's like all of those things. And so I would say that was in 2019. Fortunately enough, that transacted in 2022, I think. And that was
Yes.
not even the intention. The
Right.
intention was not sell it. The intention was, let's run this thing better. And that doesn't mean, Kenny, that you can't, as an owner, I'm trying to run personal things through the business that are, tax advantages. This is not that conversation, right? But it is about making sure that you, with all add backs, you run a very strong, profitable business.
Yeah.
And it becomes a more enticing asset. And think about that. The buyer is going to be willing to pay more for it. There's ESOPs out there, employee stock option purchases. There's phantom stocks that you can do to put things in place for staying money for your leadership that says, hey, once we transact, you get paid this, but you get paid out in tiers as well. So you really got to be thinking about what cards do I want to keep on the table? What cards do I want to take off the table? And that, for the question, that's exactly where I would get started. Once again, look beyond the transaction. What will life be like after that? And then what are things I want to take off the table? Because in some cases, Kenny, some people, they just want a continued paycheck,
Yeah.
right? They just want to be the check of the month club. And so they might decide to own or finance it. I'm not saying that doesn't work, but there's risk that goes with that, right?
There is. And I think that's, and there's risk. Let's be clear, ladies and gentlemen, there's risk in everything you do and don't do.
Mm.
There's this whole longevity movement going on at the time about health. And well, if you take this pill or you don't take that pill, there's risk either way. And so I would say the riskiest thing is to not get clarity of what you want. I think that's the number one risk, Chris, where, when we look at, I'm reminded, as you were talking, I was reminded of the home I sold last in Colorado when we were leaving Colorado was the first home that I had ever built from scratch. And we had never totally like finished dialing it in. And then when we went to sell, got to get the yard dialed in the back. We like with the front was all good and we had some cool furniture, but it wasn't what I call Four Seasons life. And that's how I want my life to live. I want to live in a Four Seasons lifestyle, just not staying at the hotel. It's where I live and that type of a scenario. And so I'll never forget how that felt of when we got it dialed, which made it even harder for the lovely Christy to leave that house. But we got it all dialed and it's like, damn, this is really nice. And we think about when we've done that with homes or a car that you just haven't really taken good care of and you're going to sell it now and you clean it up and it's like, damn, that thing's pretty sharp with some armor all on those wheels and the wheels polished and all detailed up. And that's what we want to do with the business each and every year. And I would encourage you to run, to your point, Chris, looking at business valuation and your own personal net worth, running net worth statements on yourself every year, because as you continue to get your house in order, and to your point, as soon as you remove yourself from the day-to-day operation, your multiple goes up, because up until that point, it goes back to the old early days when I was an E-Myth consultant. If you're if you're a call taker back then, a $10 an hour job, nothing wrong with call taking. But as the owner of the business, if I was taking a phone call as a call taker, booking a call, I'm doing $10 an hour work. And that's not going to make my business worth very much if I own the company and I'm a call taker. So continuing to elevate yourself and delegate yourself up, which means elevating your team. I don't believe delegation is a shove down. I believe it's a push up for people. And to free yourself up to where, what does it look like? And I'll say it this way. I always want to look at, I am the buyer of the company every year. Every year, I decide to buy blue collar again because I'm the primary stockholder. And so what does that mean? It's tied up there. And so is this thing operating like I would want it to, or am I looking at going, well, hang on, wait a minute. I want to sell it because I don't like my team, or I'm frustrated, or I'm tired, or I'm burnt out, or whatever those types of things are. And there's nothing wrong with any of those, but it's really because I've sold a service business and I was grateful enough to sell it to a long-term operations director. My goal was to make her a millionaire, and it happened. And so I'm very proud of that. And I'm very honored that I got that opportunity. And now in this business, as you know, Chris, and most of our listeners, I don't plan on selling for a long, long time, because I will do something with my life, and this is what I want to do. Now, that doesn't mean I want to do things I don't want to do in the day to day, as the kind of joke around the office is. But when you make the decision, and let's say for this listener, let's say it's 3 years out. What's the valuation you want? What's the structure look like that you want? What would be the best exit strategy that you would want? and then make a decision in 3 years. Maybe you remain the buyer and maybe you don't sell it. And if you do, then you got everything in order, including up to business structure. You may want to be a different type of a corporation by the time you sell. You may have wanted to hedge some tax harvesting prior to a sale. You want to make sure you have asset protection and estate planning in place for how your estate's going to be affected and so on. So there's a lot that goes into it, and thinking about is exactly where to start. And I happen to know you have a really good coach that can help you on this journey as well. Anything you would add to that, Chris, as we begin to wrap up today?
Tomorrow is not promised. The only thing you have is today. But that doesn't mean that you shouldn't I don't like the word worry, that you shouldn't think about tomorrow. Think about what you want tomorrow, and that I believe that we can will those things into our life. And more importantly, Kenny, everybody exits for different reasons. And I think for some people, and I've heard people say things like this, I'm just tired, Chris. I just don't want to do this anymore. And that's okay. Hey, maybe you just need to get this thing in place where you can get your money, walk away, and be done with it.
And that's fine too.
I can tell you, Kenny, with a surety, not many people that I've helped be a part of this, I would say the large portion of them get right back in the game.
Yeah.
They just take time off is all they do. And so the question is, could you take time off without having to restart again?
What a question. Let that marinate. I think it goes to the relationship with the business as an entity. Sometimes we forget, it's its own living, breathing thing, and it needs care and it needs to be taken care of. And what's fascinating is the more you take care of it, the more it takes care of you. And there's another kind of quote industry leader who's done a lot of roll-ups and built different things. And I remember he said when he was talking about selling, and he's bought and sold multiple times, multiple states, multiple locations. But he said the challenge is when you sell the golden goose, there's nothing to lay golden eggs anymore. And so that's one of the things that is something to keep in mind for everybody out there. And this is not, I'm not advocating anybody keep anything that they don't want. This is about you and your life strategy. And both you and I have both had exits, Chris, and both of us are now playing a long time game together. And so I think it's one of those things where gets back to clarity. What do you really want in your life? There's no such thing as a business and a life. There's a life, and business is part of it. So great question. Continue sharpening your clarity, and we'll continue to help you on this journey. So thank you so much for that question. And Chris, let's wrap this one up with those three today. And we'll come back. We're going to do one more mailbag episode. We got so many responses. We weren't sure how many we'll do, but we are going to do another one yet this season. So stick around for that. And again, thank you for listening. Share this with somebody in the home service space. We're just here to help you, as Chris opened from the get-go. Whether you're a member, a follower, or a watcher of anything that we do, we just want to be your tribe. We just want to help you be the best version of you in the home service business that we possibly can. So thank you for being here. Thank you for sharing your time with us. And Chris, as always, what a joy to get to do this with you, my brother.
Absolutely, Kenny. It was a pleasure today, my friend.
Awesome. See everybody soon. Thank you all.